Hello and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching A+ Essentials Introduction to PC Troubleshooting. This is part of Train Signal Fast Track CBT video CompTIA A+. In this video, our overall goal is to help you understand the fundamentals of PC troubleshooting. First, we'll talk about PC troubleshooting theory, basic diagnostics, isolating issues, then applying troubleshooting techniques, and then performing preventative maintenance. But first, let's start off with the A+ exam objectives. Now, your objectives in section 1.3 of the A+ Essentials test is to be able to identify tools, diagnostic procedures, and troubleshooting techniques for personal computer components. If I scroll down, you'll see you should be able to recognize the basic aspects of troubleshooting theory. For example, how to perform backups before making changes. It's very important, obviously, that you back up your software and your operating system and applications and data prior to doing something major to your system, such as installing an operating system upgrade, let's say. You should be able to assess a problem systematically and divide large problems into smaller components to be analyzed individually, and we'll talk about that. You should verify even the obvious and determine whether the problem is something simple and make no assumptions. Be able to research ideas and establish priorities. Document your findings, actions, and outcomes. Next, you should be able to identify and apply basic diagnostic procedures and troubleshooting techniques, and then they give you some examples here. Identifying the problem, including questioning the user and identifying user changes, evaluating results and taking additional steps if needed, such as consultation or the use of alternate resources and manuals. Next, you should be able to recognize and isolate issues with display, power, basic input devices, storage, memory, thermal issues, post errors, BIOS and hardware issues. You should be able to apply basic troubleshooting techniques to check for problems with motherboards, power supplies, processors, memory, display devices, input devices, and adapter cards. Recognize the names, purposes, characteristics, and appropriate application of tools. And then in section 1.4, it says you should be able to perform preventative maintenance on personal computer components, such as being able to identify the basic aspects of preventative maintenance theory, such as visual audio inspection, scheduling preventative maintenance, use of appropriate repair tools, ensuring proper environments, and so on. And then finally, be able to identify and apply common preventative maintenance techniques for devices such as input devices and batteries. All right, we have a lot of important things to learn in this video about PC troubleshooting and preventative maintenance. So with that, let's get started. First off, PC troubleshooting. Now, PCs are complex electronic systems. They require that many components, hardware and software, all work together. These components were made by hundreds of different companies across the earth. The software running on the computer is made up of billions of lines of code. Now, don't expect not to have any problems. Now, that said, there may be many troubles that can be easily solved. Now, as a technician, you will amaze average users with your skills at solving some of these common problems. And with that, let's get started learning about PC troubleshooting. All right, when you perform PC troubleshooting, you need to have troubleshooting tools. You need to have physical tools, that being such as a screwdriver, a hammer if it has to be, a wrench, a socket set, physical tools that you actually use. Then you'll need to have software tools, such as a disk defragmenter, backup software, antivirus. Then you need to have a methodology, which you could also call, in this case, some sort of diagnostic procedure. What are your procedures? How are you going to solve a problem? The user walks in and says, "My computer doesn't work." Okay, so what's your process? What's your procedures? How are you going to solve that? You need to get some more information from the user, obviously, right? I mean, what they're telling you isn't going to help you solve the problem other than it's broke, right? So first you're going to have to question the user You're going to have to run some diagnostics yourself. You're going to have to try to experience the problem yourself, reproduce it. Then you're going to have to try to take some steps to fix it, theorize what might be causing it. Make sure you back up the config before you make serious changes. All these things are part of your toolkit, part of the utility belt that the A-plus technician is going to wear when they go in to solve the problem like a superhero. All right, so first we'll talk about physical tools. So if you're going to be a real A-plus technician and work on computers, your first step, your first tool, I should say, to obtain is a computer toolkit. It could be even just a regular toolbox that you bought down at your local hardware store, but hopefully your toolkit has a few more tools in it that might be more specific to computers. So that's what we're going to talk about, specific toolkits for computers. Now recently I went to a few stores trying to buy a computer toolkit or a PC toolkit, and a number of clerks at regular stores looked at me like I was crazy. They said, just buy a toolkit. What's that have to do with computers? Well, obviously they don't work on computers, so they don't know that there's specialized tools that apply just to computers. Most of these tools are fairly regular, normal tools, but there's some of them that are specialized, or they might be a regular tool, but it's in a certain size head of Phillips screwdriver, a certain size head of flathead, or a certain size socket that's common on computers. That way you don't need 57 socket drivers in your set. You don't need 12 different Phillips head screwdrivers. To work on computers, there's just a few sizes of sockets and flatheads and Phillips that are required. So why have any more than you need? Have them all handy in a computer toolkit. So first off, in your toolkit, you'll need screwdrivers. Now, don't use magnetic screwdrivers. Don't buy magnetic screwdrivers because they can mess up a computer. Those magnetics can. Don't use a drill. Don't use a power tool. Now, sometimes I've used an electric screwdriver. I think that helps out a lot. But don't use a drill. You're going to strip out those tiny screws real quick. Make sure you have varying sizes, a few varying sizes of, for example, flathead screwdrivers, which is your just standard screwdriver, Phillips screwdriver, which is the plus screwdriver. Most common for computers is a number 2. 90% of the screws today are Phillips head screws. And for computers, number 2 is a good size. Make sure you have a Torx screwdriver. That might be something you don't have in your regular toolbox. A Torx screwdriver is used on Apple and Compaq systems and a number of other systems, and Torx screwdrivers have less chance of damaging a screw. Screws are labeled with T and then XX, where X is 1 through 20, and that matches up with the size of the screw head. Now, the screwdrivers match the numbers. So the most common size for computers is T10 and T15. So if you're going to get some screwdrivers to work on your computer, make sure you also get some Torx screwdrivers, size 10 and 15. Now over here on the right, I have a couple pictures of my personal computer toolkits. The first one here shows you that it has 2 socket drivers. These are socket drivers right here. And then this is a Torx screwdriver. I just have one size Torx in mine. I have this, which is kind of like tweezers almost, but you push the button on the end, and then out of the front, out of the tip down here, comes out 3 little claws. And that way you can stick that into a small space. You can push the button, the claws come out. You can grab a little screw that has fallen down in a crack, and you can pull it back up with that. That's what that's used for. You're always going to drop some tiny screw when you work on a computer. And this is a great tool to have to get it back. Here in the middle, I have an anti-static strap that I wear on my wrist when I go to work on a computer. So the fabric here goes around my wrist. There's an alligator clip that clips onto something that's going to serve as a good ground if you have some static on you. So you wear that on your wrist to prevent damage to the computer. Here, this is the chip puller. Obviously, this is an older toolkit, and most newer toolkits you don't usually see chip pullers unless you're working on maybe some kind of electronics. more, electronic component devices instead of PCs. Most PCs today don't use chip pullers, but you still might find a use for one. Then over here I have two size of Phillips and I have two size of flatheads. So that rounds up my basic computer toolkit, and you can pick one of these up at many of the popular electronics stores for about 10 bucks. And make sure you go to a computer store. Don't go to your local discount superstore because, like me, the clerk will look at you and direct you over to the hardware department to buy some kind of socket set. Down here, this is a little bit more portable toolkit I have, a little bit smaller. And in here I have a couple size of Phillips screwdrivers, a flathead, a Torx, and a pair of tiny tweezers I can use to pick up things like screws that I've dropped. So, all right, so that's a toolkit that you need to work on computers. Then there's some other tools that you need. First off, you might need some pliers. Over here, this is a pair of needle nose pliers. These can be very helpful in working on computers. Next, you might need a small socket set or a nut driver. So that's what was over here in this toolkit right here. This and this, those are nut drivers. I was calling them socket drivers, whatever you want to call them. It's the same thing. It's got some sort of socket at the end of it called a nut driver, or you can get a small socket set. Next, you might want to get a flashlight. Everybody knows what a flashlight looks like, so I didn't put one over here. You should get some compressed air. So up here, this is a can of dust off. This is compressed air that's in this. You push the button and it blows out a fast, high-speed stream of air. It's used to get dirt and gunk and cobwebs out of computers. You may need a soldering iron, although me personally, I've never used a soldering iron that I can recall in working on a computer. Over here on the right, this is a soldering iron. Of course, you would need some solder to go with it to solder wires together. That's really what the soldering iron is used for. When I haven't had a soldering iron before, I've gone to an electronics store and I've bought a little connector for wires that I could stick the two wires in and then just crimp them together. I've done that before to replace fans in, say, like a router or a switch that's gone bad. Something that doesn't have an easy connection like a PC usually does to replace a new fan. Next, you might want some wire strippers and wire cutters. For example, to replace that fan, I cut off the old fan with a pair of wire cutters just like these right here. These are also called dikes, is another name for them, but these are wire cutters. So I cut off the old wires from the old fan. I stripped the new wires on the new fan with this right here. This is a wire stripper. And then I crimped them with that special wire connector I talked about, or you could have used a soldering iron. Next, you might want a multimeter. This is a multimeter right here. This tests electricity voltage on wires or circuits. So that's what a multimeter is used for. Okay, so we talked about physical tools that you'll need to work on your computer. Now let's talk about software tools that you might want to work on your computer. So the first one is a boot CD. And it could be a boot floppy, but usually today it's going to be a boot CD. And you can create a bootable disk, or bootable floppy at least, with format A:/S. The /S adds the system bootable files. Now to create a bootable CD, you'll do that in whatever CD application you choose. You'll choose to make it a bootable CD. And then you might want to put some tools on it, that you can use once you boot up on the CD. Now, what's even better than a bootable CD is a BART PE CD. And right here, here's the URL to download the application that creates a BART PE CD. You'll need your Windows XP or whatever operating system you're running. You'll need the installation CD for that operating system. But the PE Builder builds a bootable CD that it's a real functioning version of Windows, but it includes a bunch of tools. I mean, you can't go in and run Office and things like that. It's a CD-based version of Windows that boots up. Then you can run tools like check disk. You can look at your full operating system that's on your hard drive. You could go in and you could make some changes and fix, whatever the problem is or the trouble that you're having. You might be able to fix with BART PE. It's a very powerful tool. Make sure that you have operating system CDs for all the different operating systems that you might work on. So Windows XP, and make sure you have all variants. I mean, if there's Windows XP that comes with Service Pack 2 and without Service Pack 2, I would have both CDs. You know, if there's Windows Vista Ultimate, Enterprise, and Business, or whatever the different versions are, make sure you have each one, because you might work on each of those different types of systems, and the owners of those systems or the users might not have their operating system install. Make sure you have Windows Server. Common service packs for operating systems. I would have Service Pack 2 for Windows XP on a CD separately just in case you need to apply it. And then other common user applications like antivirus software or any other common apps you might need to rebuild someone's PC. For example, Microsoft Office. Then make sure you have drivers for the hardware that you commonly use. So if you use all Dell systems, let's say, I would have the Dell CD that comes with the system, or you can create, that reinstalls the entire operating system and applications from scratch. It's a very powerful CD. Make sure you also have the drivers that go with, say, the Dell network card or the Dell audio card or whatever it might be. We talked about antivirus software. Make sure you also have some diagnostic applications. You can buy Check-It or Check-It Pro off the internet. These are great tools that go in and analyze your system and run diagnostics. You can also use WinMSD, which is MS Info 32. It used to be MSD in DOS, and I'll show you WinMSD here in just a second. You can also get Symantec, which is also Norton SystemWorks. Previously, this was called Norton Utilities. It's a very powerful tool. And a lot of the servers, if you're working on a server, they'll have diagnostics built into the BIOS, or you'll boot from a Dell server CD or whatever server vendor's hardware you have. You might be able to boot from one of their CDs and run diagnostics. So it's important to have one of their CDs. So let's go run WinMSD, and let me show you what it looks like. Takes a second for it to come up, but when it does, it comes up and it tells me all about my computer. So I have Windows XP, I have Service Pack 2, here's my client name, my manufacturer, my system model, the type of processor that I have, the megahertz of the processor, the BIOS version, the location of my operating system, my user that I'm logged on with, my locale, my time zone, my total amount of RAM, total virtual memory, paging space, and it just goes on and on from there. Here's my DMA information, my I/O information, IRQs, memory, what's in memory, what components are on this computer, what type of CD-ROM drives do I have, what type of modem do I have, what kind of network adapter do I have. Software environment, what system drivers are installed, what are the running tasks on this computer, what are the services installed on this computer, what are my internet settings on my Office 2003 applications. So it goes into just a ton of detail, and you can run searches in here. You can run network diagnostics, Dr. Watson system restore. You can do this to a remote computer. How powerful is that? You can also export it, and you can print it or save it off. So it's a very cool tool that comes with Windows, built in, completely free. That's WinMSD. All right, now let's talk about a methodology. So what is it that differentiates you from the person with the problem, or the end user that brings you their problem with their computer? Number one, you understand how the computer works. In videos 1 and 2 of this series, the Introduction to PC and Introduction to PC Part 2, you learned all about computers and how they work. So you have that knowledge. Second off, you have a troubleshooting methodology, which we're going to talk about in just a second. And then 3, you have experience. You've taken apart a computer, you've put it back together, or at least you will here in the near future. Spend some time working on computers. You have that experience. So it's those three things that differentiates you from the end user that has a problem with their computer. And you're going to use all these things to your advantage to fix that computer. So let's learn about this troubleshooting methodology. Now, before we get into our diagnostics, let me point out some important points concerning PC troubleshooting. And the following list is taken from the A+ exam objectives. First off, you need to be cognizant that backups must be performed before making changes on a computer. So someone brings you in their computer, they say, my computer's broken. Okay, well, before I make any changes, I'm going to back up your computer. You might ask them, have you backed up the computer? I think so. Well, I'm going to back it up anyway, just to make sure. Because the hardware is replaceable. You can get a new computer. If the computer catches on fire, it can be replaced. But that data, and many times all the user information and everything that's in there, that just cannot be replaced unless the user has a backup or you have a backup. And you know that you can't trust the user to make a backup. It's important that you make a backup of every system that you work on, or you know exactly what's on it and whether or not it can be replaced. Even if you just copied off the user's documents or their favorites or their email or whatever it is they have onto a USB flash drive, at least you have some kind of backup. You could get their critical data back. All right, the A+ exam objectives also say this. You should be able to assess a problem systematically. So you have some system, you have a methodology. You're not just going in there ad hoc, just trying things out. You have a plan. And so to have a plan, when you come up with some large problem or large task, you need to be able to divide those large problems into smaller components to be analyzed individually. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is right here. And I'm going to read it to you because I think it applies to breaking these large problems into small tasks. So it says, and it was the way engineers traditionally tackled huge projects, such as designing the circuitry to connect 4 million transistors on a new chip or writing a new software program that had 200,000 lines of code. They broke the problem into units, and each unit into functions, and each function into steps, and each step into sequences, and each sequence into an itsy-bitsy task that could be completed before lunch. And this was written by Poe Bronson. He's the author of The First 20 Million is Always the Hardest. I think it's a very applicable quote to what the A+ exam objectives are telling you you need to be able to do. You need to be able to break a large problem into smaller tasks and be able to analyze them individually. So maybe a user comes in and says, my computer's doing these 6 different things. Okay, let's take them one at a time. First, let me write them all down. Let's try to reproduce each one of them. Let's see if they're interrelated somehow. Perhaps all these are related to the same problem. You have to take that one problem of the computer's broken and then turn it into multiple steps to try to resolve that problem. All right, so let's move on. So the next bullet here from the A+ exam objective says you should be able to verify even the obvious, determine whether the problem is something simple, and make no assumptions. Test everything yourself and test it 2 or 3 times in different sequences. Assumptions are usually wrong. Well, I think this is very true. So a user comes in and says, my internet doesn't work. Well, verify that first off. Does the internet really not work? Determine whether it's something simple. Don't assume that maybe they just didn't type in their password right. Don't assume that. Go in and test every possible scenario that could be causing their internet to not work right. And test it 2 or 3 times to make sure you get the same results every time. You'd be surprised with computer software. It doesn't always reproduce the problem you would expect it to. So assumptions are usually wrong. Keep that in mind. Always keep that in the back of your head. Next up, research ideas and establish priorities. Write down ideas and priorities based on the best chance to solve the problem. So we talked about, okay, the internet doesn't work on my computer. Um, Write those ideas down. What might be causing that? And then maybe you go through and you put a number next to each one and rank them in number order by priority. So you put a 1, a 2. Well, this one is probably the cause. You put a 1 next to it. You go on down. Well, that might be a 2. So then you take all those ideas and then you test them one at a time. But you test them in the order of the first one being the most probable cause of the problem. All right, next up, the A+ exam objectives say you should be able to document your findings, actions, and outcomes. Notepad by your desk or on your person. So what they mean here is when you're done doing all this work, you solve the problem, it's great. Well, don't just run off to the cafeteria to get a Coke. Take a second, get out your notepad and write down what it was that resolved that problem and what the problem was. Ideally, if you have a trouble ticket management system, you'll have a knowledge base where originally when the person called in, you opened a ticket, and when you're done, you type in the resolution, and that resolution goes into a knowledge base. So tomorrow, if another technician has the same problem with a different user, they can use the knowledge base, and they can save a ton of time by using the resolution that you already found. Or maybe it happens again 2 years later, and you say, man, I can't remember what I did to solve that. Well, you can look in the knowledge base. So that knowledge base is there to help everyone, yourself included. But if you don't have that, at least take a notepad, write down your findings, your actions, and the outcome. All right, so all these things listed here are from the A+ Essentials exam objectives, not just something I came up with. These are things they say that you need to know to pass the A+ Essentials exam. All right, now we can move on to basic diagnostics. So I have here a number of steps, and there's more on a second slide, that go through basic diagnostics on how to solve a computer problem. Okay, so the first one is step 1, identify the real problem. What do you think the real problem is? Don't just take the user's word for it when they walk in and say, yeah, my computer's broke, I think the hard drive went out. Don't just assume that. Don't assume that they're right. Identify the real problem. See if it can be reproduced. Can you see the real problem yourself? If it can't be reproduced, usually it cannot be fixed, or it can be very difficult to fix. Find out the question behind the question. Find out the problem behind the problem. And what I mean by this is a user calls up and says, how can I get to this super secret website? Well, don't just answer their question. Find out why it is they're asking you that question, right? A user calls up and says, did you do something to my computer? Find out why they're asking you that. Don't just say no and hang up. They had some important reason for asking that question. Many times users don't ask the right questions. They ask different questions that are, maybe unrelated, but may be related. So make sure you find out the question behind the question or the problem behind the problem. Users usually don't know the real problem. And another thing you need to ask yourself and the user is, what has changed? Did we do something last week? Did we do something last night? Did we do something this morning that might have caused this problem? Did the user do something at any of those times? And if you get the answer, no, I didn't change anything, wait a second and ask it in a different way, because many times there was some change that nobody can remember. Step 2, verify everything yourself. Start with the basics. Does it have power? Does it have network? Does it have cables? Does it have lights? Unplug the cables, reconnect the cables. Is everything powered up? Is the computer on? Does the keyboard work? All the basic stuff that you need to ensure that the computer's working at the most basic level. Verify it all yourself. Don't just assume. Step 3, ask dumb questions. And I know that sounds funny, but it's true. Ask them stuff like, has it ever worked before? Have you ever used this computer before today? Oh, no, I just got here. It's my first day. Oh, well, then you're not authorized to log onto the computer. That's why it doesn't work for you. So ask questions that might be dumb to you, but they might get you the real problem here. Second off, why or ask, why do you want to do this anyway? You know, so a user calls up and says, hey, how do I get access to that super secret website? Why do you need access to that website? You know, have you asked your manager for permission to access to that website? You know, don't always just take a user's word for what it is they need, and don't just blanketly try to help them with every problem they might have. Make sure you work within the policies and the procedures of your company. Is there a better way to do this? It's always your job as the IT person to analyze what the users do. Are they really doing the thing that they need to be doing? You know, someone calls up and says, the printer ran out of toner because I'm printing a 1,000-page document. At that point, you could ask the user, do you really need to print a 1,000-page document? Did you know that you can view the entire document on your screen, or you can just print individual pages out of the document? Maybe the user says, wow, I didn't know I could do that. I thought I had to print the whole 1,000 pages just to read a few pages. You know, you just save the company a lot of money and the user a lot of time. So make sure that you ask those questions, even if you think they might be dumb questions to you. They might actually find a better resolution to the problem than just blanketly, you know, solving whatever problem the computer user comes up with. The next one is step 4, restart the computer. Now I know this can be frustrating to some end users, but starting off fresh with a fresh operating system reload gives you a better chance at reproducing that problem and ensuring that there wasn't something strange going on that caused the problem in the first place. So if the problem can be reproduced after a fresh reboot, then you know, hey, that problem is reproducible and there wasn't something weird going on. So I always recommend a fresh reboot after you gather all the different information and ask all the right questions to fully understand what the problem was. All right, step 5 is ask yourself, do I think this is hardware or software or the network? So is this a hardware problem? Is the hard drive going out? Is this a software problem? Is there something wrong with the operating system? Or is this a network problem? Meaning, can the user just not access the internet because it would seem that the network's down? So try to get some kind of direction. What direction do you think this problem's headed? All right, step 6 is, if it's hardware, what component is it? If the computer just flat out won't power on, it could be the power supply that's gone out. It could be the wall outlet that doesn't have electricity. It could be the computer power cable fell out of the back of the power supply. Could be a number of different things. So you can troubleshoot this in different ways. You could move the computer to another wall outlet. You could check the cable. But in the end, it may very likely be the power supply in the computer that's gone out. Step 7, read the manual and use the internet. So if the computer user says, I get this error on my screen every time I print a document. Well, if you got an error, I would take it to the internet, put it in Google and look it up, see who else has had that error and what their resolution was. Reading the manual on some more complex problems can be helpful if there's some kind of documentation or quality manual. If it's a Windows problem, I recommend TechNet, Microsoft TechNet. They have a lot of great solutions inside there to solve Windows-oriented problems. Step 8, make only one change at a time, then retest. If it didn't fix it, put it back. So say you think that the antivirus software is causing the problem. And say you uninstall the software, but the problem's still there. Well, put the software back. You don't want to make too many changes without going back to the original starting point, or else you won't know what caused the problem in the first place, right? So say you uninstall the antivirus, then you uninstall the new Office Service Pack, then you reboot the computer, then you defrag the hard drive, and oh, the problem's gone away. So which one of those things was it that solved the problem? I didn't test after I did each one, and I didn't put it back after I did each test, and the problem was still there. So, gee, I really don't know. Could have been any of those things. Well, that's not the resolution you want. You want a specific resolution so you can document the problem, and the next time it happens, you'll know the resolution. All right, step 9, ask for help. Ask other techs or ask the product support for the product. So don't spend 3 days trying to figure out why the computer won't boot. You know, ask other people in your organization. Call, Dell tech support or Windows tech support or, somebody, because those tech support organizations see problems constantly. They can fix that problem in hopefully, an hour or a day or, whatever it is, but it's not going to be 3 days. I've seen techs who it's a pride issue. They just don't want to let anyone else help them with the problem. They're going to solve it themselves, and they're not going to call anyone. They're not going to ask anyone for help. Don't be that tech, because those techs spend a week trying to fix a problem that the guy across the office had fixed already yesterday and knew the answer to. So step 10, document those results so that you and others don't have to go through this again. All right, now we're going to talk about isolating hardware issues. Now, say that you determine you have a hardware issue, and you need to know how to narrow it down to the component that's actually failing. So is it the RAM? Is it the CPU? Has the motherboard gone out? To do this, you can use your computer's post test. That's the power on self-test. So when the computer boots up, if something's completely failed, it might give you a number of beeps. So say the video card's dead. When you boot up the computer, it might give you a series of beeps that indicate that the video card is bad. The post is built into the BIOS, and the post checks the basics of the computer. Does it have CPU, RAM, video, keyboard, and hard drive? If one of these is missing or not recognized, the BIOS will report an error on the screen, assuming your screen and your video card are working. Now, different BIOS programs do this differently. Many times it's done with a series of beeps, as I mentioned. You can go to this website, bioscentral.com, for help in determining what your BIOS is telling you. So let me go to this website and just show you what it looks like. So here it shows you the different types of BIOS postcodes. So if we go into, say, AST BIOS postcodes, if the BIOS comes in and it says 61, error code 61, test RAM, then most likely there's something wrong with the RAM, right? If you have an Intel motherboard and it says error D1, it says that the keyboard controller had a problem. So there might be something wrong with the keyboard controller. So keep these things in mind. This is a great website to go and look up BIOS error codes. All right, now there's also a card called a postcard that can be inserted into a troubled PC. It can run diagnostics and attempt to isolate the hardware issue. You can buy these special postcards that go into a PCI slot on a computer, and then they'll report to you either through a software application that you hook up to the card, or maybe through a little display on the card, and it tells you what the problem is with the computer's hardware. Usually with the motherboard, the RAM, it's not going to tell you most likely a problem with the hard drive or the CD drive, but primarily with the motherboard components. All right, so now let's talk about applying troubleshooting techniques. Now, as a PC technician, you need to know how to troubleshoot base hardware issues. So let's go through some of the basic hardware components of a PC, the different common problems, and learn how to resolve them. So first, I've got a motherboard and CPU issue. All right, motherboards may fail due to damage or static. Be very careful when working around motherboards and CPUs to not damage them. Use anti-static straps, which I showed you in my PC toolkit, and store motherboards and CPUs in anti-static bags. These are special bags. They kind of look like tough looking plastic with kind of a metallic looking tint to them. They'll say usually anti-static bag on the outside of the bag. It looks like a Ziploc bag. Now ensure that no metal from the motherboard is touching other metal in the case. This can cause a short circuit. I've seen short circuits on computers before. I've seen circuits arc across the motherboard. These things can be very dangerous and can ruin all your hardware. You don't want that to happen, not to your hardware, and especially not to someone else's hardware that you're working on. So make sure that no screws or anything from the motherboard is touching the metal of the case. Make sure you use brass standoffs and the paper washers that are usually included with your computer's case or motherboard to insert the motherboard into the case. So you don't just screw the motherboard down to the case with a metal screw. There are some screws, but they go into brass standoffs, and there's paper washers in between to prevent electricity from going from the motherboard to the case. Now for CPUs, make sure that they're inserted properly and reseat them firmly to ensure for proper connection. All right, now what can you do to troubleshoot power supplies and cooling? Well, first off, ensure that the PC fan is working. If that fan isn't working on the PC's power supply, your computer is going to overheat. Make sure that heat sinks are attached inside the PC. The PC's heat sinks are glued on with a special thermal glue to the CPU. So sometimes that glue can wear off, or they didn't put enough of it on there, and the heatsink can fall off. Do not operate the PC with the case sides off. This might seem strange, but if the case sides are off, the airflow isn't working properly through the system, and the system will overheat. Even though you have a huge hole on the side of the case with air going in and out, the airflow isn't working right, and for that reason, the computer can overheat. Make sure you cover all slots on the PC except the fans ingress and egress. So you'll have a fan on the front of the system typically and a fan on the back of the system. The air flows through there. Any other holes in that case are causing air to leak out, and you don't want that. Also, ensure that there's proper ventilation around the computer's case. So don't stack a bunch of things in front of the case or behind the case, because that airflow needs to be going through the computer at all times. When it comes to memory, it works a lot like a CPU, where you need to ensure that your RAM is not affected by static electricity. So make sure you wear an anti-static wrist wrap when you take out RAM or insert RAM in a PC. Also, when you store your RAM, make sure that you use an anti-static bag to keep it in. Also, make sure that your memory chips, your RAM chips, are seated cleanly in the memory slots on the motherboard. Now, when it comes to monitors, generally they'll work or they won't work. Monitors are usually that way. You might have some flicker on the monitor. You might have a lost pixel or something on an LCD screen. But if your monitor isn't working, first I would make sure that it has power and that it's turned on. Sometimes power saving screensavers will kick in and the monitor will go blank and you'll think the power's off, or maybe the computer won't recover from power saving mode. You can disable power saving mode and maybe try to prevent that. Check to ensure that the PC is on and has power. If both have power and are on and there's still no display, move the monitor to a computer that it is working and make sure that your monitor really works. If the monitor works on another PC, check the video card in the original PC and possibly reboot the PC to see if the monitor will start working with that PC. All right, now let's talk about applying troubleshooting techniques to input devices such as keyboards and mice. Now, keyboards and mice are pretty reliable until they get dirty or they have a cola spilled on the keyboard. So just like the monitor, you can move these devices to other computers to rule out the PC causing the problem and see if it's the keyboard and the mouse or is it the original PC that they were connected to. You can try cleaning these devices, but generally it's inexpensive to just replace a keyboard or a mouse that's gone bad and just start fresh with a brand new device. So when it comes to adapter cards and CPUs, you need to take careful care of these adapter cards to prevent electrostatic discharge. Now, if you have trouble with them, ensure that they're seated properly in the computer's motherboard. Take them out and put them back in, push down firmly to make sure they're inserted, but not too hard. You don't want to break them. Now, if you continue to have trouble, you can move them to a known good machine and retest to see if it's the adapter card or is it the original PC that's causing the problem. Now note that most of these devices can be affected by non-functioning software drivers. That may be why you need to check and replace the drivers depending on your results with other tests. So if the other computer has the same adapter and it's working and it has the drivers installed, if you move the adapter over there and it works, you know there's nothing wrong with the adapter card. you can move it back to the original PC, maybe reload the drivers, reboot the PC, reseat the adapter card, and after each one of those points, retest the adapter card to see if one of those things resolve the issue. Now, some common tests that you can do are BIOS tests, post tests, hard drive diagnostics, and software diagnostic tests. These are just some common tests you should think about when you start having problems with your PC or your server or your hard drive. All right, so we talked about troubleshooting PCs. Now let's talk about performing preventative maintenance. So just like on your car, you must perform preventative maintenance by changing the oil and checking the fluids. Now you'll want to change the belts and the hoses before they break while you're driving down the highway. You'll also want to replace the battery before it's so old that your car won't start. So all these same preventative maintenance tasks that you would perform on your car are also applicable to computers and peripherals. So some common computer preventative maintenance tasks are listed here. First off, there's visual inspection. So you walk around the computer and you look at it, right? It's that easy. But what are you looking for? Well, you're looking for the proper environment, which is the last bullet. Meaning, did someone stack a bunch of files all around the computer and now there's no airflow going through the computer? Is a computer sitting next to a giant cooler where there's lots of humidity coming out all the time and the computer's starting to grow mold inside? Just examples of ensuring the proper environment. You'll want to make sure you periodically clean the system. Take a can of air and blow out the fans. Take off the case cover and see how many dust bunnies are inside. You'll want to perform driver and firmware updates as well as BIOS updates. Periodically, these drivers and firmware software applications get out of date. Bugs are found, and you don't want those bugs affecting you, so you need to update your drivers and firmware periodically. As well, update your operating system and applications with patches, not only for security, but also for reliability and performance. You don't want all your users calling you at one point saying, gee, their PCs are running really slow, when there was a big announcement all over the news last month that said there was a new virus coming out, and if you just apply this software upgrade, you can prevent all your computers from running slow. Well, gee, I guess I should have applied that software upgrade then, huh? Yes, you should have. And then finally, the last one here is disk defragmentation. So the more people use their computers, the more the disk drives, their hard drives, get fragmented into little tiny pieces. This causes inefficiencies and it causes the computer to slow down. So to better performance, you want to periodically defragment the computer's hard drive. Now say you have some electrical components, such as the gold connectors on RAM chips. You should use denatured isopropyl alcohol. This removes the oxidation from the copper or gold contacts. All right, any kind of battery, such as your UPS, your uninterruptible power supply, should be checked periodically for its ability to hold a charge. Now, what you can do is just simply pull the power cord out of the wall socket and get your watch and see how long that battery will power the computer. If the computer immediately dies, you know that battery's bad. Of course, before you do this, make sure that the user has saved their work on the computer. You don't want them losing anything. So you're checking to see if the battery holds a charge. If it doesn't, it needs to be replaced. Don't forget that your system board also has a CMOS battery on it. So if the computer completely loses power, that CMOS battery is there to keep things like system settings and time and date. It's about the size of a watch battery and it's easily replaced. All right, now preventative maintenance also applies to your software as much as it does to your hardware. Installing updated firmware, drivers, and patches is very important. It's also important to run applications like ScanDisk, Disk Defrag, and Disk Cleanup periodically. There's an application called Perfect Disk, which is a third-party application. It can run on servers and workstations and keep the disk defragmented during the off hours. So it would be great to have this application installed and say every Saturday night at midnight all your servers defragment their hard drives, and Monday morning all the hard drives are running as efficiently as possible. Just an example of what you can do with this third-party application called Perfect Disk. but you can also manually scan and defragment your hard drives on any Windows system using Disk Manager. And with that, we've reached the conclusion of our video covering troubleshooting and preventative maintenance of PC computers. In this video, we talked about PC troubleshooting theory, we talked about basic diagnostics, how to isolate issues, how to apply troubleshooting techniques to different types of hardware and components. Then we learned about performing preventative maintenance on your computer. I appreciate you watching our train signal video on performing preventative maintenance and troubleshooting personal computers. Thank you very much.